Welcome to FO Talks. With me is Leonardo Vivas. He's a professor at Lesley University. You may remember him from our previous conversation where we spoke about rising tensions between the United States and Venezuela. This time, we are back talking about Venezuela, only this time it's not Nicolas Maduro. We are going to talk about Maria Corina Machado. Leonardo, for our global audience, can you tell who is Maria Corina Machado, the lady who recently won the Nobel Peace Prize?
Hello. How are you doing today? Well, it was a huge surprise for me when I learned about her getting the Nobel Prize because there were a number of people, and rumors about this, about that, and and the question is that she obtained this Nobel Prize because she has been the most important fighter for democracy and freedom in Venezuela. As you know, Venezuela has been under a very crude dictatorship in the number last 10 years or so, and she led the struggle for presidential elections in Venezuela last year, where the opposition won 70% of the vote, and the government, Maduro himself, decided that no, that they would carry on in power. So, this is the reason why she was selected, and I would say that she has been one of the most clear opponents of even at the time of Chavez, when it was not a dictatorship. It was a democratic regime going into more authoritarian uh, you know trends, but it was still there was a Congress. People could speak openly in Congress. There was a rather free press still at the time, and ever since she was one of the most strong opponents of Chavez.
Leonardo, you've actually met her. You were just telling me about how you met her briefly about a few years ago and that you actually knew her father. Can you tell us how the interactions with her and her father were like?
Yeah, I mean, her father, he was the founder of Sivenza. Sivenza was a conglomerate of metalworking companies, very, very successful, and one of them was and both most of them, or the two of them, were located in the southern part of the country. And at some point in last century, I was in government and in charge of the Ministry of Development of Industry, and so I met him, and we visited these companies. His company, even with an Argentinian another Argentinian company, when the main steel working company in Venezuela was privatized, which was a state company, Sidor, they participated and bought the company. Of course, when Chavez came, they was renationalized, and his companies were expropriated, all of them, and which now are in ruins. And Maria Corina, despite being from a very, very wealthy family, of course, she went more into doing nonprofit organizations for abandoned children, and she had more of that social part, which is part more came more from her mother's side. Uh, her mother was a very famous tennis player in Venezuela who had been in international competitions. And so she started that, and very soon, and then she founded an organization to look at transparency in elections called Sumate. And after that, she ran uh, and for as a congresswoman, and she had the highest number of votes of any other elected official in Congress. So, and ever since she has very fierce opponent of the government. Yeah.
What are some of her key contributions to not just the governance in Venezuela, but also society? You've spoken about how she was involved with non-for-profits and she was into social service. But what are some of the things that really put her in the limelight, apart from the fact that she came from a rich family?
Well, as as I said, she became the congresswoman with the highest number of votes in the country and in Congress, and and she was, as I said, a very fierce opponent, but it was, and and so she was, kind of the perception that people had of her is that she was kind of very to the right of the political spectrum. But that has been that kind of started changing, and especially in year 2023, there were primaries of the opposition. That was a time when there had been negotiations between the opposition and the government, and between the United States and the government, trying to allow uh, for free and fair presidential elections. Well, presidential elections were not free and fair, but there were reasonably open elections, and there was the opposition was allowed to have a primaries, and she ran in those primaries in a bit, changing her vision about participation in presidential elections, and she won the primaries with 92% of the votes. So that was a huge surprise, and that was the fact that she was put, as you said, in the limelight. And more to it, I mean, that started something that hadn't happened in Venezuela since Chavez, and it is the idea that hope for change in Venezuela was associated with a person, and that was Maria Corina. I mean, she went all over the country bringing her message, and her idea was to, there is approximately 9 million Venezuelans in the Venezuelan diaspora. So one of her main messages was to bring together Venezuelans outside and make them come back. Let us have our children back. That was one of her clearest messages, and it struck a chord, and everywhere she would go, and people would, Venezuela is a very Catholic country, uh, not profoundly religious, but there is some parts of the country are very religious, and the people would give her rosaries, and she would collect them, and they would bring their children, and for her to touch the children, or would bring the messages, and uh, and after that, she was not able to run, but then she made a number of negotiations in the opposition, and finally another person was selected to run, and that was the person. And it happened a few weeks before the election, and that person won with a 70% of the vote. So she has been the incarnation of the fight for democracy and for freedom, and back to democracy and for freedom in Venezuela.
Please correct me if I'm wrong. The person that actually took the position after Maria was Edmundo Gonzalez. I think he won the previous vote. But then I
Yeah,
think he had to run away to Spain because he was being persecuted by the Maduro regime. And
right.
he still is not back in Venezuela.
No, no, he is he's in asylum in Spain. Yeah, there was
Right.
negotiations and many factors intervened and he was allowed to run, but his family, his son-in-law is in prison. He was captured just after he left, and he's still in prison. And it's very difficult. People can't see him. The family can't see him. He, so and the rest of most of his family is still in Venezuela. That's not the case of Maria Corina, who is in
Yeah.
hiding, and she's been in
Yes.
hiding for ever since the elections.
That's what I wanted to come to, because the case is very different for Maria Corina, because since the election, as you said, she has been in hiding and Maduro still attacks her. He continues to call her a traitor. Do we know where she is? Are we certain she is in Venezuela? That's my first question. And secondly, with her now winning the Nobel Peace Prize, how are things going to change for her? Do you think she there's more risk to her life, or do you think the people of Venezuela are now going to make it a point to basically support her more than ever?
Well, yeah, she is. She is in hiding. I don't know where she is. I know people who know where she is, uh, uh, because she has a very efficient uh, team of people that work on her security. Uh, but I think that her having been awarded the Nobel Prize is makes her more secure, because I don't think under those conditions the Maduro government will ever even try to touch her or even try to put her in prison. Even I think even if they knew where she is, which they might know, I don't think they would get her, because that would, I mean, it's a very weak government, and that would, and it's very isolated internationally, and that would put her in even a worse situation than it is now.
So you're basically saying that she now has more immunity because of the Nobel Peace Prize
Oh
than
yes,
she did before.
oh yes, she does. I
So,
think
so
she does, and I think it also reinforces the role of Venezuela's opposition. Uh, why? Because ever since the uh, the government, Maduro's government, stole the elections, what has been in play mostly, especially this year, 2025, has been a controversy between the U.S. government and Maduro government, and to a certain extent, the opposition has been waning, and it's the most people are in prison, in exile, and hiding. So uh, look, there was another presidential candidate at the time, and he must have won like 5% of the votes. But he defended the right of González Urrutia to be the president, and he was put in prison. He's still in prison, actually, and she's been in prison for for more than a year. So what I mean is that the situation now that she has been awarded the Nobel Prize changes, because now she is a participant in the discussions. I mean, the U.S. government cannot ignore the voice of the opposition, because she won the Nobel Prize, and the status and legitimacy of the opposition has has been has grown a lot. I mean, compared to before. So in the table now we have three players, not two players. We have three players.
So let's look at Maduro, because he has obviously called it a political prize and not a Nobel Prize. He says that this was done to undermine his government. There are also several critics who say that this Nobel Peace Prize was very politically motivated. But then my question to you is, isn't every Nobel Peace Prize prior to this politically motivated? I mean, clearly sides are being taken. In Venezuela's case, what is playing out right now? Are Venezuelans happy with this? Or do they just not care because it really won't affect them in the short run?
Well, look, Nobel Prizes are always, I don't want to say politically motivated or that they have a strictly a bias. I would say that a peace has a political motivation. So whenever you award a peace award, a Nobel Peace Award, you have to take into consideration the different situations. Like, Mandela, he had been in jail because he was a freedom fighter with guns, and and then he became an nonviolent and preaching peace in his country. Uh, but many others have been not necessarily peace seekers, but seekers of social change and freedom. So. Uh, and I do think that this has been a great boost for Venezuela's freedom. I mean, you can feel it every person you talk to in Venezuela, or look, you've had like some Spanish composers, people who sing that sing the flamenco music, that have composed songs for Maria Corina, and you have now people who are composing songs with a more in America, and composing songs for her with their own rhythms, country music. And not to speak what is happening in Venezuela, inside Venezuela, which this has been received like a fresh air, bringing more hope to the fight. And we don't know what's going to happen, and things are getting more. I mean, there's been a more escalation between the U.S. and the Maduro government, and but what I do think is that his in a way this the awarding Maria Corina the Nobel Prize has kind of cornered more the Maduro regime, which is now so isolated. And I'll just give you an example. 2 days ago, there were two defenders, human rights defenders, that were in an asylum in Colombia, and they were shot. They were not killed, but they were. One got 7 wounds, and the other one got 8 wounds. Uh, and and very soon, the prosecution in Colombia has been saying that there is signs that this was a hit and run. That there was, you know, contracted, and who else could contract? So it's a Maduro government that has been probably. I don't have the evidence to claim for this, but it is likely that behind those assassination attempts is the government, because they did kill somebody in Chile a year ago, and it was a person who was in exile, lieutenant colonel, retired, and he was sought. And what the prosecution in Chile says is that there is evidence that Tren de Aragua, which is a criminal gang, was contracted by the second man in the Venezuelan government, which is Diosdado Cabello. So, I mean, this, and everybody knows this in Latin America and in the world. So it's a very isolated government.
Leonardo, I want to talk about the two major criticisms of Maria Corina winning the Nobel Peace Prize. And the first one is that many accuse her of being funded and supported by the US. They cite her relationship with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. They've known each other for more than a decade. They've met each other at several occasions. And very recently, her conversation with Donald Trump Jr. has gone viral, where she was basically explaining that Venezuela needs to privatize its oil companies and its oil industry. And how are people going to see this? I mean, do these claims have any merit, or is there some truth to this?
Well, I mean, Maria Corina, you know that in the U.S. there has been one characteristic, one trend, which is until now, until today, is that there has been a bipartisan approach regarding Venezuela. At the time when there was the interim government by Juan Guaido, which ended up in not producing any change, any political change in the country, it was a bipartisan. When in the last Trump administration, he invited Juan Guaido to, the day that the president speaks to Congress. It was bipartisan, and both parties and everybody stood up. And until now, there has been a bipartisan. So the fact that she knows Marco Rubio, well, she knows other people from the Democrats as well. So she is respected by both. She might have, at this point, more, uh, let's say, be closer politically to Marco Rubio, because Marco Rubio is known for wanting to change the situation in Venezuela openly, and which is not the case of some Democrats over, and which have been more cautious vis-a-vis what to do with Venezuela. That's one thing, and then the other, the question of oil. Look, Venezuela used to produce 3.3 million barrels a day and had two of the three greater, largest refineries in the world. And all that is in shambles. Venezuela has not spent $1 in exploration, let alone exploitation. And the Venezuelan oil company and everything, the infrastructure, refineries, is in shambles. It's really so. And apart from that, it has a huge debt. So how a country that has been collapsed, a country that has a huge debt, immense debt, a country that has lost trillions upon trillions of dollars by of corruption by uh, Chavez and then Maduro and then a number of other officials. How is it going to pay to make a state oil company work? I mean, no way. In order to make that a feasible, a profitable company, you have to pay the debt, and then you have to make investment. And there is no way, there is no money in Venezuela to do that. Venezuela is like Cuba collapsing, and there is one electricity one day and no electricity the following day. So there is no option in Venezuela to go about a renovation of the oil industry without private investment. So it's a matter of rationality. It's not a matter of ideology. Of no. Even Venezuela, I'll tell you, Venezuela had before Chavez, it was a state oil company, and it was one of the most profitable and one of the most competitive companies in the world. Well, that is gone. That is gone. And in order to have a revival of Venezuela's oil company or other options for development of the country, you will need private investment.
Let's talk about the second criticism that she faces. She is actually one of the few Latin American political figures who openly support Israel. In fact, she has supported Israel even during the war in Gaza. Don't you think that this kind of undermines her peace image globally?
Well, I really haven't followed Maria Corina related much to the war in Gaza. And in Israel, Venezuela was always a good friend of Israel. During the 40 years of democracy, Venezuela had very good relations with Israel. Venezuela has a Jewish community which has been very, very active. And not now. It's been under some certain duress under with Maduro and Chavez. Uh, so I don't think she is particularly. I mean, and as we know, what happened in Gaza started in October. You know, and yes, there has been terrible things happening in Gaza. Uh, I don't want to get into the details, but we know that there's a lot of people, on hunger, difficulty to get, and yeah, and even the International Criminal Court has spoken about genocide, and but but I don't think Maria Corina has been especially, you know, related to to the war in Gaza or supporting, you know, I don't think she's ever said anything about supporting Netanyahu or any or the actions of the army, the Israeli army in Gaza.
Right. Leonardo, not many people may actually know this, that after she won the Nobel Peace Prize, she actually called US President Donald Trump and she dedicated her prize to him. Why do you think she did that? What is the big reason behind it? Do you think that the US had a major role to maybe influence the Norwegian Nobel Committee? Or was this just a gesture from Maria Corina?
Well, when she was awarded the prize, she said that she would dedicate the Nobel Prize to the Venezuelan people first, and then to President Trump, whose government was supporting Venezuela at the moment. And the reason for me is simple. She didn't want to suffer what President Zelensky suffered in the White House. I mean, she didn't want to go through that. Have, we all know who President Trump is. We know, how his personal involvement in whatever he does is there. His ego, that's current knowledge. So I think she did it for political reasons because Venezuela will not change without the support of the U.S. After we had the presidential election in July 26th, uh, and the government stole it. Now, how can you say that a an electoral strategy is the only way out, like some people say? I mean, we tried, we won, We showed the world that we won, but now they say, no, you didn't win. It's our, we continue in power, and that's it. And so there has to be something else. So the pressure, if there is no pressure from the U.S. and other, because it's not only U.S., it's creating a coalition that might help change in Venezuela. But without that, there is no possible change.
Well, one thing that the Nobel Peace Prize has done is that it's brought attention back to Venezuela. After the election last year, when of course Maduro stole the election and reports were out, global attention was on Venezuela. And then it faded away for a while until the US started carrying out kinetic action against small boats linked to Venezuela. And that was it. And those are one time incidents. So it's news, it comes in, it goes out, and that's it. But now the situation is different. There's a lot more analysis, a lot more people are talking about it. A lot of Venezuelans like you are basically educating people of why this Nobel Peace Prize is so important, not just to Maria Corina, but to ordinary Venezuelans as well. So, what do you think is going to be I would say, the strategy going forward for not just Maria Corina, but for ordinary Venezuelans as well?
Well, I think we have to keep on uh, bringing more people in favor of change in Venezuela, which President-elect Mundo Gonzalez has been doing. You know, he's a seasoned diplomat, and also trying to organize internally, clandestine work, like things start very under very kind of after you have what happened in Venezuela, which was a huge repression after the election was stolen. Uh, it's very difficult to do any political kind of open demonstrations, people on the streets. No, so there have been very few, and one of them is the movement in favor of political prisoners. And this has been continuously, nonstop, asking for, and this has, for historical reasons perhaps, has been allowed, and but it started like that, and then recently you had in universities people also, putting uh, signs and claiming for freedom in the country. So this takes time. But the important thing is you have to be ready in the country and put pressure in the outside. And of course one of that sources of pressure is the US.
Thank you, Leonardo, for speaking to Fair Observer and for telling about the Nobel Peace Prize that Maria Corina has won and the different layers that are behind it and why this is no ordinary peace prize and it could actually change the lives of millions of Venezuelans.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.